Hi, Eric. Welcome to the DevOps Diaries podcast.
Hey, Jack. Thanks for having me on today.
It is an absolute pleasure, my friend, and I'm so excited to finally get you on the podcast. Since its inception, you've been somebody that I've been waiting to get on for a while, so I really appreciate your time. It's super valuable, and hopefully we have a great conversation today, all about Salesforce community. Speaking of the Salesforce community and your role within it, people might be familiar with you being the Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce community. Can you give us a little bit of background and an introduction to why that is?
Yeah, sure. That's a nickname that a friend of mine actually um, gave me. I guess is the proper word for it. All the way back in I think it was 2014 or 2015. This friend of mine, Lori Witzel, and I were standing in line for a session at Dreamforce, just waiting to get into the room and just talking. And she says to me, Eric, every time I have a question about something Salesforce related and I don't know the answer and don't know who to go to, she said, I always end up going to you. And Lori said, it's either you know the answer or you know someone who knows the answer to that question. And she said, it's like you're Kevin Bacon in the Salesforce world. And my mind just went ahead and said, I got to do something with that. I'm grabbing a hold of that little moniker, and pretty much from that point forward, I've claimed to be the Kevin Bacon in the Salesforce ecosystem. Um, I even wrote a blog series on my personal blog site for about 2 years after that point in time. Had an almost weekly blog post where I did nothing more than introduced members of the community to the community, and I did that through, I think it was 6 questions. What's your name? What's your job title? What's the company you work for? What do you actually do on the job? Because job titles and actual functions don't always match.
Mm.
And bacon, sausage, or neither, just to throw in another bacon reference. And everybody else knows me for my bacon breakfast and my love of bacon itself. And then there was one wild question which had nothing to do with Salesforce. It was just, I suppose bacon doesn't either, but um, I asked people, tell me something about you that would surprise my readers. And I got all sorts of interesting responses to, I'm a mountain climber, I run marathons, all sorts of crazy things. Um, but that was a fun time for me. Met a lot of people through that. I stood up a forum and posted it out on Twitter and a few other places and said, hey, I'm doing this blog post series. If you want me to introduce you to the Salesforce community, just give me your info. And I got lots and lots of responses, and then basically turned that over, created a blog post out of it where it was sort of an interview style blog post, and literally just said, hey, community, here's John. Here's what John's all about. And did that week after week after week. It was fun. I
Amazing.
had thought about trying to resurrect it, but I don't seem to have quite as much time as I used to now.
Well, I imagine the real Kevin Bacon probably doesn't have a lot of time on his hand either.
Yeah, probably true. He probably
I
makes
ask
a
you.
little bit more money than I do.
I ask you then. What's the one thing about you that might surprise others?
Oh well, that's a great question. I think I've said this to a few other people, and some people in the ecosystem know this, but a lot of people may not and are very surprised when they hear this. I have 0 Salesforce certifications,
Oh
not a
wow,
single
really?
one. Yeah, no,
Well,
that tends to be a little bit of a shocker, I suppose, for some people. That I've been in this ecosystem so long, I've built up such an interesting and impressive career with 0 certs.
wow, I mean, you know what? That makes me feel miles better about myself because I also have no certs, which I think is also a surprise, also a surprise to people. Which just goes to show if anybody is listening to this in the Salesforce community and you don't have a cert right now, you can find huge amounts of
There,
success. And
there's
uh,
there's hope for you yet.
yeah. Eric, building that community and that reference to being Kevin Bacon and being Laurie saying to you, you either know the answer or know the person to ask on the topic it is the questions on. What's what's the kind of being the biggest benefit, I guess, to you, or the most gratifying thing being a connector of people in the Salesforce ecosystem. And just how have you been in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, so I first logged into Salesforce in, I think it was September of 2009. So it's going on 15 years or so, or closing in on 15 years in a few more months. Obviously, seeing a lot of changes, a lot of great features implemented, and all sorts of new technologies being added in and around the platform. Um, the first few years in the ecosystem, I was on the customer side, working for a couple of different customers, and my role for those two organizations centered around helping them launch Service and Sales Cloud to sales teams. And then I took over reporting and analytics functions in both of those organizations to help, basically to help management of those teams understand what was going on, how the sales were going. In one case, it was a contact center as well. So what were our customers calling in with problems about the software that company made and things of that nature. But then in 2015, I believe it was, my career took a pivot. I saw a demo of a product at Dreamforce and immediately fell in love with the product and the company and wanted to go work for them. And that was my next goal, was I got to get a job with this company and do something supporting this really cool product. It took a little while, a few months to make it happen, a few conversations, a few failed interviews, and one recruiter who was working at that company that was pretty persistent. And at one point, after, I don't know, probably the fourth or fifth round of interviews for jobs that just weren't right for me, she said something to me like, it's obvious you're passionate about wanting to work here, and you see a lot of value in the product that we have. She says, but we're not finding the right fit for you here. So what is it you really want to do for us? You tell me what your ideal job looks like here. And so I explained to her, here's the stuff I know really well inside Salesforce. Here's the reason I contacted the company in the first place, this particular product. And that's the thing that I want to support. And here's how I envision myself doing that. And a few months later, I get a call back from that recruiter, and she says, hey, our marketing team wants to talk to you about a possible role with them. So a few more interviews later, a few more meetings. I actually had probably 2.5, 3 hours worth of interviews with that team at Dreamforce in 2015, and landed a job with them just a couple of months later in January of 2016. I started working for that organization. In what today's terminology we'd call a product evangelist. Back then, that term really wasn't used. I don't even think Salesforce used the term product evangelist back that far. But that's effectively what I was doing for that organization, was that. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, that was where I saw my value with my connections in the ecosystem, with the kind of the personal brand I had already built up to that point. And all the value I could bring to the organization around supporting that product and sharing the various use cases and things that organizations around the world could do with that product. So that's early on. That's kind of the first steps. From that point forward, I've been on the ISV side for the most part exclusively in marketing departments, doing things to help support sales and growth around ISV partners.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Not that dissimilar to what I do. I kind of have you to thank for roles like my own. So
Yep.
for that I thank you. Thank you greatly. And something that you've mentioned then is I feel that sometimes people don't understand what a product evangelist is or what it is that we do. So you've mentioned contributing to sales and growth, but what is it that we do apart from run podcasts,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously, and
Right.
among other
Yeah.
things?
What product evangelism is all about is being that face and that first impression for the organization, and representing the product that the company has, or products and services, depending on the organization, in a positive way, and showing off the value and making others realize, oh yeah, I really do need that particular company's products and services because of X. So I mean, you run the podcast that helps gear set and the message about what DevOps is all about get out to the world. in my previous careers and in various stages in my career at other companies. I traveled quite a bit, showing off a product that I used to work for, to user group meetings at Salesforce conferences, user group community conferences, and things like that. Hosting webinars, even doing virtual meetings, talking about the product, showing off use cases and the value of what it can bring to an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that piece around being kind of a face and advocating for not only the product that you offer but the kind of the problems that you're solving. I think the Salesforce professionals that you and I come into contact regularly with at user groups, at community conferences, Dreamforce, TDX, etc., they all have a whole list of problems, and there's a whole that ISV marketplace is saturated with things that might be able to help them and make their lives better. But it's incumbent on us to show them that lives can be better through products and services in that space, but also that we're aligned and we understand them and we get them and we understand what it is to be a Salesforce admin, developer, architect, whatever it might be, and the day-to-day
Yep.
challenges that they have in their careers. Which
Yeah,
brings me on. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's one distinction that probably needs to be made between around the differences between a product evangelist and a salesperson. And I think the key difference really there is an approach. Um, salespeople are typically driven by a quota. They have a certain number of deals they need to bring in and close every month, a certain metric that they're being measured upon that has a dollar value associated with it, that their job literally depends on,
Yeah,
because they're salary and commission based, and they want that big commission, so they want all those deals, and the company does too.
of course
So
you do.
their approach might be a little harder, if you will. The evangelist role, I think, takes a different approach, where we focus not specifically on our company and our product so much, but on, as you were just talking about, the problems that organizations have and the various ways that they can be solved. And oh, by the way, the company I work for has a product that does just that. I mean, so it's a softer version of sales. To my knowledge, those of us that have been in these evangelist roles are not paid a salary plus a commission. We're just a salaried individual, and it's our job just to get the message around what the company's about out there in the ecosystem through whatever means that is possible. And I know a lot of people talk about this and have said it for years. I think a lot of businesses and a lot of transactions, regardless of price, tend to go towards people who the organizations know and trust. So if you become that
Yeah,
trusted advisor by sharing knowledge, whether it's about your product or other things within Salesforce, you're still building that knowledge base and that trust out there for other people. You're going to be the go-to person or organization that someone's going to prefer when it comes time to buy something that fixes a specific problem.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I agree in that. Being somebody that you can turn to, like I'm going to come back to your Kevin Bacon thing and what Laurie said about you having that knowledge yourself and or at least knowing where to turn is hugely valuable. Something that we've touched on and made reference to already is conferences and community conferences. I see you're wearing a Buckeye Dreamin t-shirt as it stands
Yep.
right now. So shout out Buckeye Dream, shout out the Buckeye Dreamin crew. Um, but you also have one of the another accolade tied to you for being one of the founders of Midwest Dreamin, which, as I understand it, is the first Salesforce community conference that existed. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't believe that's 100% accurate. It's the first one that used the term "dreamin" in the title, and that
Okay.
seems to be the term that has stuck moving forward. Snowforce has been around a little bit longer than Midwest Dreamin. This is year 10 for Midwest Dreamin coming up in 2024, although we skipped 2 years because of COVID, and we skipped 2 years very early in the Midwest Dreamin life. It happened the first time in 2011. 2012 and 2013, there was no Midwest Dreamin' as well. Snowforce, I believe, got started in 2009 or 2010, so it's been around longer than Midwest, and it happened one of the two COVID years, just simply because of the timing of where it
Mm.
is on the calendar. It's early in the year, and COVID hadn't really shut things down yet. This would have been um, 2020, I think, when that took place. And then in March, I think kind of everything started shutting down. Snowforce was in February. Um, so that one's been around quite a bit, a little longer than Midwest. But when I first got the idea to do Midwest Dreamin', it was in 2009 when I was first working in the Salesforce ecosystem, because the company I worked for at the time did not have budget to send me to Dreamforce.
Right.
And back then, you couldn't see much of anything Dreamforce related online. The keynote might have been live streamed. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. There may have been some content that just went up after Dreamforce. But there were conversations going on Twitter and LinkedIn and places during the event. And the way my mind functioned when my boss told me, sorry, we can't afford to send you, she did say, you can use your own money and pay for the event on your own, and use company time to go. And even back that far, a week in San Francisco was pretty pricey. It's not by today's standards. It was pretty cheap compared to today. But I decided I couldn't afford it back then. And my mind said to me, if I can't go to Dreamforce, let's bring it to me. And that was the whole thing that started Midwest Dreamin'. Dare I call it a selfish desire to experience the conference similar to Dreamforce. The concept just kind of blew up over the years. The first year I held it, my biggest struggle, I think, at the beginning was, how do I find a location to hold a conference for an unknown sized crowd, and I don't have any money to put down to hold the space up front? Um, I
So
managed to
where did it
find a
happen?
hotel in yeah, I managed to find a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, the Galt House Hotel, right downtown on the riverfront in Louisville, that was willing to work with me and reserve the space for me and let me host the conference there, based on a business plan that I built up that said I will have X number of dollars in these certain time periods leading up to this event to pay for the cost of the conference. Um, and fortunately for me, it all worked out. I found enough sponsors. I charged the attendees a little bit of money to come. And I think when it was all said and done and I had paid the bill at the hotel for the catering, the audiovisual services, and meeting room rentals and those kinds of things, I think I had a couple $100 left. At which point I turned around and donated that balance to the Benioff Children's Hospital, and wiped the slate clean, if you will, from
Yeah.
any of those dollars that I brought in for the conference. Um, Going forward over the years, the conference has gotten a lot bigger. That first year, there were 100 people attending in Louisville, Kentucky. I think I had 7 sponsors that year. By comparison, Midwest Dreamin' 2023 had around 900 attendees, and I think we had close to 50 sponsors, attendees from 43 states within the U.S. and 6 or 7 foreign countries.
Yeah.
Where that first one, I think we had attendees from like 5 states in the U.S., and that was it. So the Midwest has greatly expanded over the years, or at least those people who attend Midwest Dreamin' has it's drawn a crowd from all over the place. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty interesting. It's been pretty fun to watch the rise. And for me, whenever I see a new Dreamin' event pop up, again, shout out to Buckeye Dreamin'. Um, it feels like I'm watching a grandchild be born,
Oh,
because of all the effort that I put into this, and then all the effort I know all these people are putting into creating another conference themselves. It's pretty gratifying for me just to see a new one start.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I did have the pleasure of attending Midwest for the first time in 2023 last year, and it is it is amazing of the level of investment that Salesforce professionals put into attending the events first and foremost, but the level of engagement that they have. Like I speak regularly at a lot of the Dreamin' events, and I've had the pleasure of doing that, and it's kind of rapturous. But to you, what makes Dreamin' events special?
You almost touched on it just by what you just said a second ago. For me, I think the best part about the Dreamin' events, as opposed to like Dreamforce and TDX, is how easily accessible people within the community are, whether it's product managers or some execs from Salesforce who attend these events, or just people you've met through the community, through Twitter, through LinkedIn, wherever. Um, the crowd's a lot smaller. It's much easier to find someone for a conversation. And then occasionally, you run into somebody at the event who you didn't even know was going to be there, that you've only known through the online community.
Mm.
And you get this chance to meet them in person. You recognize their face because of their LinkedIn profiles or their Twitter accounts or wherever, and you know who they are as soon as you see them. Um, and you can have that, hey, thanks for helping me out all these years with whatever it was they shared with you, and you can have those really good conversations face to face, which is totally different than what you and I are doing right now through this podcast. Still great in the virtual world, but there's something about that face to face and that ability to shake a hand or give someone a hug or share coffee or whatever with somebody, that just makes it special.
Yeah, I think that deepness of like human connection that we experience at those events is really special. Like that, the humanizing aspect of it all. I think we can talk. Well, it feels weird to still talk about COVID, but I think COVID really did kick our backsides a little bit in terms of depleting that human connection, and trying to re-enter that world has been easier for some and harder for others. And those that have found it hard, I think, are thinking about attending these events but don't want to because they've been put off by that whole 2-3 years that we went through,
Right.
are suffering for it. And I think just last year, like getting back into the swing of things and attending all the events that I did last year, I had an absolute blast. And it was a reminder about how important these real human connections that we make are, being virtual and connecting with each other, which we all do regularly, being interspersed across different countries and across different states. Virtual is great, but like you say, that real human connection that you experience when you're there is everybody's excited as well. I think that's one of my favorite things
Yeah.
too. Everybody's just like pleased to be there and sink their teeth into
Yeah, I
sinking
agree
their
with you
teeth into different
there.
topics.
And even thinking back to the first couple of live in person events that took place towards the tail end of COVID, um, when those events were requiring masks and daily testing for COVID, you could still see the joy in people's faces from here up,
Yeah,
even if you
yeah. You
didn't actually
smile with
see
the
them
eyes, right?
smile. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What's one of the core tenets of the community events is the sessions that get selected for speakers, providing an opportunity for learning, but also providing the community a chance to share their knowledge with the rest of the ecosystem is one of the core tenets of these community events, primarily. What makes for you as an organizer and an attendee and somebody that has sat through countless hundreds of sessions at these things, what makes a good Salesforce community presentation or a good presentation in our ecosystem generally?
It's a really good question, and from the Midwest Dreamin side of selecting the content that we have at our event, I stay out of that picture. I don't vote on the sessions that are submitted, and I do that on purpose simply because a lot of people ask me for help prior to submitting a session. They'd like
Right.
my opinion on their abstract and the topic that they're talking about, and to try to make sure that it's going to be selected. I've spoken. I've had sessions selected at Dreamforce just about every single year I've been in the ecosystem, with the exception of one or two. Um, like you said, I've spoken at countless community conferences and user group meetings as well. So I do it all the time. So I feel like I understand what the community is looking for in a session. So in my perspective, there's more value in me helping the community build sessions rather than helping the conference select them. But
Yeah.
I think in reality, I think what at least Midwest Dream and probably most of the community conferences, I think what they look for is a clear, well written abstract that states very clearly the purpose of the session and summarizes the key learning aspects that someone's going to walk away with, and emphasizes the value of what they're going to learn to what they can take home to their own organizations and apply it tomorrow. What can I learn
Mm.
today and apply tomorrow that's going to fix something I have, fix a challenge I have right now on the job? Um, and that can, that can come in all sorts of different forms, whether it's talking about a specific product, or whether it's writing a new flow, or even like right now, where lots of people are going through the migration process of no longer using workflow rules and process builder and shifting over to flow. um, there's a lot of people that don't even know how to do that, that may have learned how to do that because they sat through a session at a conference, where someone walked through the process of, here's how you write your first flow, here's the things you need to do to consider. Um, those types of hands-on approach, or the knowledge you can share, or the things you gain from watching someone else talk about the challenges they had and how they solved it, I think is almost invaluable in a lot of cases. Um, it's sometimes human nature to be a little scared to ask a question during a
Mm.
session, during an event. I was that shy person back in the corner many years ago, just taking it all in, um, and just sitting back and listening and watching other people talk about an issue, and it happens to be the same issue you have. You're getting the solution to your challenges right there, just by sitting in a room listening to other people talk about it. That's hard to replicate anywhere other than an in-person event, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. Also, I find also the number of people that come up to you after your sessions, after you've been talking about your area of SME, and you kind of get flooded a little bit at the stage with more questions, and it's just such a. I find it's such a good starter point for a lot of folks to dip their toes into a subject or start to consider different things, which will then enable a wider conversation at that conference with that are in smaller kind of groups afterwards, which extends that learning experience. And I think that's one of the other most valuable things. You get time with the speakers, you get time with the experts that are presenting to you as well. So for
Yep.
anybody considering attending, it's not just go and listen to the session, take it all in, and run away. Like, the speakers are there for you. You've got a whole day, or 2 days, or 3 days, or however long it might be, to go and dive into those things a little bit more. And I think that's a really unique opportunity that you don't get at TDX or Dreamforce, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, what would your advice be to any of the listeners that either are new to the Salesforce ecosystem and the Salesforce community, or have been working with Salesforce for a while that haven't yet dipped their toes into getting engaged more with the community? Where do you start?
That is a really good question, and it can be scary for a lot of people on
Yeah.
becoming more active, becoming out there, if you will, becoming social, and to some degree. Um, and actually, I've got a whole session that I presented at a few places on that very topic of I think I called it something like building your brand and your career in the Salesforce ecosystem, where it goes through a series of 5 or 6 steps of what you can do to start that process and make it happen. And the first step literally is get over your fear and just get out there and do something. um, Go to a conference. Maybe you've never gone to a conference before. Go to a user group meeting. Maybe you've never done that before. There's user groups all around the world, or community groups. I should be using the current terminology, not the old school one. Um, they're all over the place. I mean, there's a local one in my city that I started. Hasn't been very active since COVID. I'm still trying to fire it back up. But within a 2 to 3 hour drive, there's 4 other cities I can go to go to community group meetings, and that's probably the case for a lot of people. Um, but if beyond just attending, or lurking, as I call it, on social media, um, at some point the things that you see that someone's posting on social, the content they're sharing, a blog post or whatever they've shared, at some point you're going to read something that you just have a comment on, that you want to say something
Mm,
about. Get engaged with the people who are sharing that information. Post the comment, post your thoughts. Even if it's contradictory to what they might have said, share that anyway, but do it in a nice way. Don't say,
mm.
you know what, you're wrong. Here's why. Take a better approach and say, here's an alternative solution or a different way of thinking about it that I came up with that worked for me. And once you get into those conversations and you start engaging, then you're going to realize there's benefit for you personally, but there's also benefit for everyone else who's reading and following the conversation. You're going to go from being that lurker, that person just kind of hiding in the corner and taking it all in, to flipping over to the other side where you're now out there, you're sharing your knowledge, you're helping others grow in their own careers. Um, and sometimes that transition takes place almost overnight for some people, and for others, it's a very
Mm.
gradual thing. But once you get to the point where you realize, you know what, I'm not the guy hiding in the corner anymore, as I kind of described myself earlier. Um, Lots of magic can happen. For me personally, when Lori and I had that conversation way back about me being the Kevin Bacon of the Salesforce ecosystem, that sort of sparked my own beginning of my own personal brand. I mean, the
Mm.
very first time I wrote a blog post, um, I did it simply because I needed a place to store some notes from some sessions and some learning that I did. And my organization system at home uh, is not the greatest. My wife refers to it as a piling system rather than a filing
The
system.
piling system,
So
that's good.
I thought I want to take these notes and save it in a place where I know I'm going to be able to find it sometime. And what a better place than the internet, right? I mean, the internet's forever. You can Google search a few words here and there and find literally anything you want to know about any topic. So I created a blog site, and simply wrote my notes out in something that was more of a story format and published it, because, that's what you do with blogs. You publish it. Lo and behold, some people started reading it and talking about, hey, that the thing that you just shared, the knowledge you shared, helped me out. Um, and that kind of set me on this path of building and growing my own personal brand. I purposely started thinking about what I did more, the thoughts that I had, the knowledge that I needed, and creating more blog posts and sharing it over and over again with other things. Started speaking at events beyond just my local user group, um, and built this personal brand that everybody now knows. That has Kevin Bacon in the theme. That has my bacon breakfast I do at Dreamforce every year, and coming to TDX this year, I'm doing the breakfast as well, since I'll be at TDX in March. Um, and so all of those things that you do, regardless of how you decide you want to create your own personal brand, all of that stuff has value for you personally, and for the community. I mean, for me, for example, over the years that I built this great personal brand, it's effectively guided my career. And probably the last 5 or 6 roles I've had in the ecosystem didn't necessarily come from there being a job open at a company that I wanted to go work at, but it started more with a conversation. I specifically remember at one point where had decided I was ready to leave an organization because it had changed so much from when I first got there that it was no longer the right place for me. I took a very targeted approach on my job search, and I didn't search for a job. I sent emails out to people that I knew really well and trusted, that were working for organizations that I would like to go work for. And I simply said, hey, I don't know if you have any job openings available at your company that match my skills, but thought I'd let you know I'm available. I'm looking for a new challenge and wondered if we should talk. It was that simple. Just, hey, let's
Yeah.
have a conversation. And back then, this was a few years ago now, probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe, that led to 3 job offers within about 2 weeks. That was amazing. I was surprised as to how quickly that happened. But then I had that daunting task of, all right, which one do I pick? You know, it's tough. It's great when you get job offers. It's tough almost when you get multiple job offers, because then you have to figure out which company, which role is truly the best fit for you.
Yeah.
And there's a whole series of questions you can be asking yourself and around how to do that. For me, I would say to everybody out there, don't look specifically at the role in the company, but look at the values of the organization and the things they do outside of standard work. What's the company stand for? What causes do they support? Does that align well with you and the things that you support? For me, diversity and equality is a big deal. So I always look at the makeup of the leadership team of the organization. It's great if a company says, yeah, we support diversity. But if you go to the page on their website where it shows their leadership team or their board members, and all you see is white men, that's not diversity.
Mm.
So that would flip me away from that company, perhaps towards a different one that maybe actually walks the talk, showcases their diversity by hiring, by having a lot of women and minorities in leadership positions. For me, that's all very important because it's personal.
Yeah.
My family is a very diverse family between kids and grandkids and their spouses and their boyfriends and things like that. So all of that stuff is really important for me. Keep those things in mind as well. And if you're struggling to find work right now, this might be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow. But sometimes it's not always about the money either. Um, you
Right.
know, it, I've been around this world quite a bit. I've worked through a lot of jobs, and there was one time in my career when I took a job for a very specific purpose to get my family moved back home. I didn't feel like it was the ideal position for me, but it came at the right time and had the right amount of money to make things happen for us to be able to live the life we needed to back then. But I didn't enjoy the job, and I only lasted about 2 years at that particular role because I knew it was wrong going into it, but I took it anyway, and that was one of those I'm going to do this for the money kind of roles. So that's while it's important that you have enough to pay your bills and live the style of life you want to, it's not necessarily number one or shouldn't necessarily be number one on the priority.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's you're an experienced and storied person, Eric. You have experience across a lot of facets of the line that we tread, and a lot of our ecosystem is focused on upskilling and considering all of those things. Building a personal brand, for yourself and for the right reasons, so it does open up doors, like you just mentioned, can be hugely empowering in the times that might be hard. And unfortunately, it looks like we are largely still in some quite challenging times for a lot of people across the technology space generally, not just in our own smaller
Yeah,
ecosystems. So yeah, I think that's super interesting about what you say about just writing, and people come to you and will engage with it, and it's that build it they will come mentality.
exactly right.
If you're
Yep.
if you're thinking it, somebody else might be thinking it. Like, why don't you put that out into the world and generate a conversation? And I think one of the things I would like to see of our community more is, like, I do think there is a lot of great engagement on LinkedIn and on Twitter and all of these platforms, but having an open discussion and be able to have productive discussion with alternate. You mentioned alternate viewpoints to what might have been written out there, and
Mhm.
for there are so many different ways that you can do things in our ecosystem, technically or otherwise, with soft skills. It's just generating that conversation. We'll all become better for it, and if we can engage in mature conversations around every one of those topics, then I think we'll all be better for it. So I hope that's something that we continue to value and uphold, for sure.
Absolutely.
Um, final question for you, Eric, before we wrap you up. And before I ask this, I want to thank you so much for your time and your generosity with the listeners. But what would be the one piece of advice for anybody looking to get the most out of their careers over 2024? We're recording this in early January, as it stands right now. So for 2024 and maybe even into next year, what's your advice for the Salesforce community at large?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jack. I would say probably the biggest thing to focus in on would be yourself. Dare I put it that way? It's to be able to figure out what you want your career to look like. Where is it that you want to go? There's so many things that you can do in this ecosystem, whether it's technical or non-technical, or hard skills versus soft skills, things of those varying natures. Kind of figure out. I think what's really important is to figure out what you really want to do in your own career going forward, and then from that point determine how you need to get there. In my career, like I mentioned earlier, I have zero certs. My a lot of my career journey has come around just based upon that personal brand and the connections that I've built up and who I know, not necessarily what I know. I wasn't a marketer when I was hired into my first marketing role. or at least so I thought. And that was even now that I said that. Now that I said that, I even remember
Yeah,
that
little
was
did
one
you
of the
know.
questions. That was one of the questions that the VP of marketing at this company asked me while we were in this conversation at Dreamforce way back. She said, "So Eric," she said, "tell me about your marketing experience," because they were going to hire me into a marketing department for an ISV. And I looked at her and I said, "I don't have any marketing experience. I've been a business analyst or a financial analyst or an accountant or whatever my job titles were leading up to that." And I said, "I don't have any marketing experience." And she said, "Let me tell you why you're wrong and help you understand that." And what she went back to was Midwest Dreamin'. She said, "You saw a need for something and you created a solution, and then you promoted that solution and people showed up." And she said, "In Midwest Dream in 2011, the first year it happened, how many people were there?" She asked me that. And I said, "Well, there were 100." And then she said, "In 2014, the second year you held the event, and the year that this woman was a speaker at Midwest Dreamin', she also said, how many people were there?" And I said, "Well, we had about 500 that year." And she said, "You don't see that kind of growth without marketing. So, knowingly or unknowingly, you were a marketer and you grew that event from nothing to over 500 people in just 2 iterations." She said, That's great. You truly know what you're doing. You're a marketer." And that was pretty eye opening to me for someone to tell me I had skills that I didn't think I had. I think a lot of us sell ourselves short and don't
Mm.
realize the talents that we truly have. And that's hard. It's hard for us to figure that out sometimes. So, where am I going? Back to your question on this, I think in addition to keeping abreast with the current technologies and understanding the platform and what Salesforce has to offer and the new stuff they're bringing on, keep in mind the softer side of things, of what skills you have. And in a lot of cases, you're going to need someone else to help you figure out what that looks like. Find a mentor. Approach people that you know and respect that you've seen great content from, and just simply say, "Hey, can we have a conversation? Can you help me figure out what I am? What's my path?" I do that a lot with a lot of individuals. Some that are new to the ecosystem, some that are not. There's people that have been around this ecosystem for years that are being forced to pivot their career because of the current economic situation and organizations laying people off. I'm happy to have those conversations with anybody in this ecosystem around what their career is, where they are today, whether they're brand new to Salesforce or not. Um, so, if you're listening and you want one of those conversations and you can't find someone to have it, hit me up on LinkedIn or Twitter, shoot me a message. I'll find some time for a conversation.
Perfect. Eric, thank you so much. The links to Eric's Twitter, LinkedIn, and various online presences will be in the description of this episode. So listeners, you may go there and pester Eric at his request there. Eric, thank you so much for your guidance and your leadership across the Salesforce ecosystem. There are so many that appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks,
Listeners,
Jack. I really appreciate the time you gave me today.
no, you're welcome. You're welcome. Listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this episode with Eric. As always, if you'd like to like and subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform it is you happen to be listening on, that really helps me out with bringing you great content from across the Salesforce ecosystem. And I will catch you all on another episode very soon. Thank you.